Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and with us this week we have Jason Torchinsky. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good, very good. Can you tell the audience a little bit about sort of who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm an automotive journalist. I am co-founder of the new automotive website called the Autopian. I used to be a writer at Jalopnik for about 10 years. I have a book out called, I'm going to grab it.
Oh, nice.
Called Robot Take the Wheel,
Okay.
about autonomous cars. And I write about all kinds of car stuff, a lot of minutia and ridiculous things and taillights and crazy crap like that. Interesting.
Okay. Well, first of all, where are you? Because there is so much stuff in the background.
Yeah. I'm in North Carolina, which is where I live and work. This is my it's like a basement office / workshop. Yep. So I've got a lot of, like, this is an old Apple IIc. There's an old Atari back there. I actually put on driving, an old pole position game because I thought it would work well. And I have I do little projects here. I had a background in art, and so I build a lot of things. And then there's also like car parts back there, and there's some carburetors for my Beetle are on that table there.
Okay.
Some wheels.
Okay, so let's wind back. How did you start this journey that sort of ended up here? Have you always been a bit of a car person? How did you end up in the automotive space?
Yeah. So I have always been interested in cars. I didn't come from one of those families where I had like a dad who was super interested in cars or anything like that. My dad, could barely staple. He was not interested in that kind of thing. He was a very different kind of guy. But he did have a car that I loved as a little kid. Like when I was really little, he had a 68 Beetle, a semi-automatic Beetle. And that was kind of like my gateway drug into not just cars, but weird cars, because I'm old, deeply old. And growing up in America in like the 70s and 80s, where I was living, there weren't a whole lot of super interesting cars in the road. There was a lot of old Delta 88s and Honda Accords and things like that. So the Beetle was like the one car that really stood out and did things differently. And that kind of got me interested in cars. And then I started to like do more research. This is pre-internet. So I was going to the library and I realized I had to get like travel books to find the really weird stuff. Like a book on Prague would show me like, holy crap, what's that? And then later I'd learn that's a Skoda, or that's a rear engine Renault or something like that, or a Tatra I saw in a picture of like a big. So, that's kind of what led me down the path of realizing I really like weird ass cars.
That sounds like such a more sort of interesting and like journey in terms of it sounds a bit more painful trying to find the stuff, but like, oh, there's a picture in that one book magazine of something, and like no one knows what it is.
I would, so I always drew a lot, and I was always like a kid who did a lot of drawing and stuff. So I'd draw pictures of things I'd see, and I'd have like I remember vivid, like I know what it is now, but I remember in some books seeing the back of a Renault, a 4CV. The Renault 4CV, and it has a very distinctive. Or was it a 4CV or was it a Fiat 600? I don't know, but it was the one that had it was a Fiat 600. It was a really distinctive rear engine car. I could tell it was rear engine because I knew Beetles, but I just drew like the vent pattern on the back, which is very distinctive. And there was no Google image search or anything like that. So I just had this picture that I had I drew and I locked in my head. And then I would try to find it again and again in other places. And much later I realized what the hell I was looking at. But it wasn't easy. It was a pain. And you couldn't you just had to keep digging, and there were, the car books at local libraries were not great. There were, there were like some that would always show up. There was always like when I was a little kid, it was always like these books of like crazy hot rods and things. And, they have that bathtub hot rod, which one of our partners, Bo Bachman, actually now owns.
Okay. So I'm going to miss all of these like American, I'm going to say references. The bathtub hot rod. What is this?
Yeah, so there was a period in like the late 60s where people were making absolutely bonkers hot rods, like delivered, like made for model kits, just completely batshit. And one of them was a bathroom, basically. Its body was a bathtub. You would sit on a toilet to drive it. It was what was it called? It was called. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. So that thing where so yeah, that I remember seeing that a billion times as a kid. And our partner who started the Autopian with David Tracy and I actually bought this and restored it. So that's like meeting,
sick.
I don't know, it's like meeting Superman. It's like, reading about or something fictional, like you read about it as a kid and then it exists. So it's
That
great.
And okay, this looks like also it looks. Have you driven it around then?
Not yet, but I'm going to. I'm definitely plan to drive it.
This looks very super sketchy.
Oh, they're all sketchy. I've driven other hot rods of this era. They're not meant to be driven. They're sculptures. They're really sculptures. And I've driven one that's like this fire truck one, and it's got the massive wide rear tires and tiny pizza cutter front tires and this ridiculous steering tiller thing. It's almost impossible to drive. It's terrifying. But I have driven. What's that?
Yeah, it looks super sketchy. And then this bathtub one, it looks like if you move your hand, like if you just turn around and point, you're going to stick your hand into fan belts and all.
Oh yeah, 100%. Also, you notice I don't see any kind of radiator in that thing either. So even if you do drive it, you're not driving it for long either.
No, unless
they're terrifying. And usually they have a big V8 in these things, so a lot of them have a lot of power, at least in short bursts, but like zero suspension, zero anything. They're absolute death traps. So they're not meant to. You're not going to take a little bit of
a drag machine, not to like 200 meters.
Yeah, if even.
If even. Okay, wow, that is some mental looking stuff. Yeah. And then right. So you said you are an artist. Was that the sort of what you started pursuing as a young person? Yeah.
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be like a cartoonist. I wanted to do kind of art stuff. And so I did a lot of that, and I always did a lot of drawing. Always, and that was always kind of my career path. And then when I was a little bit older, I got like an Apple IIe for my bar mitzvah. So I got really into early 8-bit computers and programming. And I still have a whole bunch that I do projects with even today, actually, just because I really like the aesthetic of them and I like working with them. And I'm, apparently unwilling to learn anything after I turned 13.
What sort of thing can you do on those?
You would be surprised. So so I've done recently, so one project I did like a couple years back, so a university around here for National Poetry Month, they had a bunch of poets, they were doing stuff. And so I did a project with them where, how on a computer, every every letter has an associated number, the ASCII code. Like A is like 96 and whatever. So
I didn't know.
0 to 255. Okay. They all got it. So I had these poets. So I had a little routine on this old Apple II that would play a musical tone based on a number 0 to 255. So I know nothing about music or really poetry, but I like the idea of both of them. So I told these poets, okay, you write a poem. I'm going to take every letter and translate it into a musical tone. So you guys have to figure out how to write something that both is intelligible as a poem and sounds music-ish. Yeah. And so I wrote this program that did that, and then we had there was like an event for this poetry month, and so I had loaded in all their poems, and we, the poets read them while these awful square wave tones were playing, and I can't say it was good, but it was fun. And so I used it for that, and then I did an installation actually. So with that computer playing pole position, I took an old Lancia and I made it look all 8-bitty. And then this was in an amphitheater at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. And we had it. So there's a giant screen in the amphitheater. And then I wired up the steering wheel and the pedals and the shifter to the controls of that old Atari computer. So you would sit in it and they would project this giant image of pole position on screen with pixels like, this big. Yeah. And you would sit in this pixelated car and you would actually drive. And it was like you were playing pole position. That sort of a game, but sort of an installation at the same time. Yeah. So a lot of the things I do are based on that. So I worked with this art collective when I lived in LA called Machine Project, and we did a lot of like weird things that I was able to work old computers and old tech into. So a lot of the art I did involves like old obsolete technology. I did a installation actually in the UK over in at the Arnold Feeney in Bristol. You know the Arnold Feeney Museum in Bristol?
I've not come across it, but yeah.
Well, it's an art museum in Bristol.
Yeah.
But I did an installation with another artist where I was working with audio tape, and I had gotten 2 reel-to-reel tape decks, and I strung audio tape on these little 3D printed thimble reels all around the gallery. So one was recording and one was erasing, and there was tape that was just all like just around every single wall. It was fun. So I did a lot of stuff like that, art installation wise, and a lot of old tech is just fun stuff to play with. That
is cool. I like the sound. All of those sound pretty interesting to me. The making the music out of the poems. Did you mess with the number order?
No,
to try and like make it sound better.
No, I did nothing to make it sound better. It sounded mostly terrible. Also, the sound system on an Apple II is about as crude as you can get. It's not good, but even at the time, it wasn't good. In 1988, it wasn't good. So it was just the harshest square waves. So this was a real challenge for the poets. And the thing is, some of them pulled it off really well. Some of them actually, because I wrote like a thing where they could, on an emulator, since I can't, they don't have this crap. On an emulator, they could try it out and play it, and some of them did a really good job. And I think that's creatively. I think, and that goes back to why I like working with these old machines. Restrictions are what excite me. Like, if you have, like, if you're a kid and you were given a full box of like 64 crayons, it's almost impossible to figure out what to start drawing. But if you're given 3 crayons, whatever you've got will inform where you're going to go. And these old machines are that way too. If your restrictions are really harsh, you're going to figure out something interesting to work around them. So I like that a lot.
And you have to come up with like a pretty clean solution as well, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's only, and when you're working with old technology with all its limitations, the boundaries get more restrictive. So you don't get, it's just easier in some ways to like get the scope of what you're trying to do. And I'm pretty sloppy in a lot of things. So, people are more forgiving when they know the thing you're trying to do, whatever on is crap.
Yeah. No, and then you get all the nostalgia and all of that stuff thrown in.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say one other piece I did that I was excited about is I made a giant Atari joystick. The standard Atari joystick I got in my bag, but 15 times scale, and it actually worked. So like you could grab it and it was actually cool. I still have part of it back there. If you want me to bring out the giant stick part,
that is wicked. That I bet that's pretty fun and slightly hectic to try and use.
Oh, it was very difficult. It usually would take 2 people. Someone would be on top moving the giant stick, and someone would be mashing this gargantuan button thing.
It sounds like a great sort of team building exercise that some company would try and use. So you're making these sort of fun art tech combination projects, and then at what point in time did you start sort of writing and getting involved in websites and stuff like that?
So my path is a little weird. So in school I studied art history because I was very career minded. So I studied art history, waiting for that curator boom. And then I was also doing a lot of I did a lot of comedy. I did some stand up. I opened for George Carlin once back in the day. And I used to do a lot of stand up comedy, and I had a sketch comedy group. So I did a lot of writing based on that. And I had like a column in, and then in like high school and college, I did cartoons in the paper, and I would write like humor columns. And I continued doing that when I went to college. And I started like a sketch group, and all the while I was learning like modern design programs and things like that for other things. So design kind of became like official, like graphic design and interface design became my main career. And then on the side, I was always doing comedy stuff. Back in the zine era, in the pre-internet era, I worked on a bunch of zines, and I worked with my friend Karen McLaren on the zine called Stay Free that ended up as a book, and it was kind of big for a while there, and I would write funny things for that. I eventually got I worked for The Onion as like an idea writer for The Onion's video arm. and I was always doing a lot of like stand up and sketch stuff and writing for like The Onion, like on the side while I was doing design work as my main job. And then for a while we did some game design as well. We made some like online games in the early online game era.
Oh, nice.
And I started a company to do webcasting in like the early 2000s, kind of before, like, sadly we had no pandemics then. If we had a pandemic, I could have been loaded right now, but we had no pandemics. We had great software. We had something that did like video and slides and polls and chatting and quizzes all integrated. It was like very pre-Zoom. And I think in some ways better than Zoom, but of course the internet wasn't exactly ready to handle that kind of thing. And I ended up losing a crap load of money. And that's, in like that period. So that was, so I was doing all that, and that was, and then, so after that period, when I finally decided this isn't working out, my wife and I got pregnant. Sally got pregnant. And I realized we're gonna have a kid, and I didn't have real health insurance. I didn't have anything because I was like a startup company, and I didn't have any of that shit, and it was rapidly cratering. So I decided to take a job as a teacher. I was living in LA at the LAUSD. So I taught design at a high school. It was interesting. The high school was actually the old Ambassador Hotel where Robert Kennedy was shot, was actually turned into a bunch of high schools. So it was actually kind of, it was in there in like the Mid-Wilshire area in LA. So I was teaching design at a high school, and I kind of hated it. I liked teaching the kids who gave a shit, but the process of forcing kids to pay attention to things that they weren't interested in, I didn't like, and like having to police wearing of hats and things like that in class. I just didn't like doing it. I did once raise a kid a whole letter grade higher for eating a big wad of wasabi on this field trip we had to Little Tokyo. He was a good kid, but he didn't work very hard. I thought he could deserve better, so I made him a deal. Yeah. He ate this like golf ball sized wad of wasabi. Kick him up a whole letter grade. Nice. He did it, dude. To his credit, he earned that B or whatever the hell I gave
fair
him.
Enough. That does sound like a particularly challenging part of teaching. Like I think most people probably get into teaching and go, yeah, I quite like teaching people, blah 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 blah, or I enjoy this topic, and then you come across that and you're like, oh.
That's the problem. I mean, the teaching part itself, I loved. The actual process of helping a kid who's interested learn how to do something. And if a kid has a little talent and you can see it in that kid and you can help them find it, there were definitely kids like that in every class, but there were like maybe 8 to 10 kids like that in a class of 30. And then you had 20 kids who could not give a shit. And the process of trying to just get them to do anything and to deal with their idiotic ways that they would try to cheat or like, it's a computer class. So when kids turn in the same project and it's clearly the same file with the file name change, it's like, come on. Like, I can tell, I'm not an idiot. And I had like a setup where there's a classroom of Macs, and as the teacher, I could like see everybody's screen, and I had like an overhead projector. So it was fun. If some kid was like searching for something embarrassing, I could just throw it up on the screen, and you could see, who had all the STDs or whatever. Nice. Or kids, or they would use like the camera on there to like do makeup and stuff, and I would put it up on the big screen. I mean, it was fun to some degree, but I also kind of hated it, and that's when I realized autojournalism was this thing, because I kind of found out about the whole idea of autojournalism. So before I was doing this, I was doing freelance writing as well. And there was a magazine called Make. That's a great magazine. And my friend Mark Frauenfelder, he was one of the editors over at Make. And I thought it would be cool to do a Make episode about, so there's a race for $500 or cheaper cars in America called the 24 Hours of Lemons. Oh yeah. And so I entered that. I wanted to put a team together at race. So I got Make to sponsor me to put together a car for that race. And so we put together our car, and I got a little team together, and we wrote an article about it and ran the race. And when I was doing that race, I started realizing I met a whole bunch of people in the autojournalism business. And even before that, I had bought an interesting car. I had a British car, actually, a Reliant Scimitar. You know Reliance?
Yes, vaguely.
Yeah, they're known for like their 3-wheelers, but
they're quite cool looking things.
Scimitar. What's that?
I'd say they're quite cool looking things.
It was a shooting brake. I mean, it was a very cool car. I had an old Volvo P1800 that I had driven for a while, and then I had traded it for a Scimitar. Yeah, there it is. Mine was yellow also. So it was just like that guy up there. And I loved this thing. So I drove around this Scimitar a lot, and then someone from Jalopnik, Johnny Lieberman, actually came out to see my car and do a little story on it. So I realized there's people who are making their livings driving interesting cars and writing about cars. And then when I entered the Lemons race, I encountered all these other automotive journalists who were making a living writing about cars. And that just got in my head as I was waking up every morning to go to my teaching job that I did not like. And I'd be in the shower thinking, I got to find something else to do. And so I got a side gig from someone I knew at Jalopnik, Murali Martin, that's his pen name. But so I got a side gig from him writing a column at Auto Week. It was like I would write like bi-weekly column. And I only did that for 1 month before the editor of Jalopnik at the time, Ray Wirt, reached out to me and wanted to see if I wanted to try writing at Jalopnik. And it was like in the December of 2011, because it was winter break. And so it sucks when you're a teacher in America. I don't know how it is in the UK, but we treat them like garbage in America. And so, you know, over like breaks, like summer, there's no pay. You just have to figure out
what?
Yeah, you don't get paid in the summer. Like over the summer break, they're just like, have a good time, tough shit. And you get no paychecks for 2 months. So I was keeping things going. Like I'd gotten these big art commissions. I got a big art commission like 1 year when I was a teacher, and I did these giant Space Invader statues that appeared in Culver City. So that covered me for like one summer. And then that next summer was coming up, and I realized I don't have anything. And I haven't been good about like parceling out my money because you're not making that much money to begin with. So it's a raw, we treat teachers terribly. So if there's any takeaway from this, just pay your teachers better, America. So yeah, when he offered me a gig over the winter break, I was like, okay, this could be useful. And then it was like a trial basis thing. And then after that, they decided they wanted to hire me because I wrote a couple things that went kind of big. I wrote this thing about how Pixar, you know, the cars in the Pixar movie Cars, the eyes should be the headlights and not the windshield. And that actually blew up a lot because for one thing, it's true. And there's a lot of just Pixar stans who just couldn't get it through their heads. So it caused a lot of controversy, and that's posted really well. And then they hired me, and then I stayed there for 10 years.
Wow. And I had I've had a bit of a look through because I like Jalopnik. It's a website I've sort of known about for a while. A long time ago, I used to sort of submit photos for I can't remember what they were called. It was like with wallpapers, and there was like one.
Oh yeah. I remember that. Yep.
The most amazing blah 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 of a blah blah blah. That's what they were normally called.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of hyperbole in there.
Yeah. And then like an average photo.
yeah, like the back half of like a Festiva.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a website that's like so different to stuff we have in the UK. Now, I'm not aware, there might be one I'm not knowing about, but they just sort of take the piss attitude in a sort of large platform size in the automotive space. We don't really have one in the UK. Everything's a bit serious.
Well, I guess you had Top Gear, which was kind of an inspiration for a lot of Americans for some degree of piss taking.
Yeah, like a little bit, but as a website,
that's what made that's what I loved about Jalopnik, and that's what I did a lot of that at Jalopnik. I would write. I especially love writing like if Bugatti or Rolls Royce or any of those companies had something released. They had like a press release. I love just referring to them as like piles of crap, like just like really lay into like, and you know, it's a $8 million Bugatti or whatever it was. Clearly, it's not really a pile of crap, but they would still get mad and send like pissy letters back to us. Like, did you really mean to refer to us as like, you know, a steaming heap? Like, yeah, I mean, they can take it. You're fine. You're Bugatti.
Yeah,
you're not going to have your reputation ruined by me messing with you. But I would do that a lot, and it was a lot of fun.
How do you go about coming up with the ideas for these posts? Like, I just had a little look through, and you have posts on absolutely everything.
Yeah, I wrote. So over my time at Jalopnik, I wrote over 6,700 posts, about 3 a day, for 10 years, roughly. And you're kind of hit the nail on the head there. And you write about absolutely everything. Like, as soon as I realized there is no detail too small, too fussy, too ridiculous for me not to decide to write about it. If it's automotive and it caught my interest, good enough for me. And I learned, if you're enthusiastic about something, you can translate that enthusiasm to the readers. And biggest example I can think of this is, for some reason, there's not a good reason why, I love taillights. I love taillights. There's something that I've written so many stories that if I had to actually pitch them to an editor, there is no way in hell the editor would say, absolutely, let's run with it. The public needs to know why this Beetle taillight is not like every other Beetle taillight. Like, they would never fly. But people will read these things. If you get super excited because in Italy and Australia for 1 year, there's a 1 year only Beetle taillight that looks like none others. And if I can convey the genuine fucked up excitement that I felt, then people will feel it too. And you'd be stunned by the kinds of minutia that you can get people interested in. Like anything, door handles and taillights and side marker lamps and weird dash clusters. And it's all interesting. And
was that in your sort of description as a writer? Like, I get obsessively whatever about taillights. I feel like that was.
I think I include it now occasionally, like in Twitter bios and stuff, because it's come associated with me. So now anytime there's an interesting taillight thing, I'll get a billion messages on like Twitter or whatever, like, you know, or if a new car comes out, people want to know my take on the taillights. And the crazy thing is, I have opinions on these taillights. I do give a damn.
See, I had a look at this and came across a post on the Autopian, which we'll get to in a minute.
Sure.
And it's like, what was it? How Lamborghini completely half-assed the lights on its most legendary supercar.
Yeah,
Lamborghini
they did.
Countach.
Yeah.
And then, like, I'm scrolling down. I'm like, what is this? And, like, let's have a look. Blah, blah, blah. And then I see the pictures of the Countach, and then you're like, oh, here's the sketches of what it should have looked like, and then what it does look like, and then your breakdown of how they've gone about it. And you're like, oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, they grab them off an Alfetta, and then they just put a plastic, like you saw in the prototype the shape they wanted. It was this kind of trapezoid thing, very dramatic. That is not at all the taillight they picked. They picked 3 blocks, and then they just made a plastic piece to like hope you're not going to look at it too carefully. And from a distance, okay. And then they got rid of that plastic piece. The other one is just a block. And then in the front, where they have the turn indicators, they have this beautiful, like, it's like a sloping piece of glass. And then there's the shittiest, like, part shelf, like, trailer light just jammed up in there. It's a supercar. It's a Countach. Like, spend the money. Like, people notice these things. I think. I don't know. They get away with it, but
I think this is probably a classic situation of when you look at now, like, I don't know, Porsche or VW or whatever, and you take a car, let's say a VW Polo, they've spent so much money on like a button or the door handle or whatever, and lights cost an obscene amount to make. But when you're someone like Lamborghini and you're like making a bespoke car that you're only going to sell whatever, a couple hundred of, like, they just search all of the parts catalogs.
And it's crazy because, like, it just doesn't, you know, it's hard to get that. Like, we understand why. Making a light has regulations, and it's an incredibly expensive thing. And if you're low volume, it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, if you're buying a car as expensive as a Countach, and it's coming out with lights that are either like out of a parts catalog or for some little econo box, it's weird. That's a weird dichotomy to kind of try to reconcile. And it's always something that's fascinated me. I love that, actually. Modern cars also, I was just the things that they got away with in the past. There's so many things that whatever happened, our standards are so high right now. Like when I was growing up, one of the most popular cars on the road were these GM mid full-size cars. And they were on the 4-door ones, the wagons, the sedans, all of them, the backs, the side windows and the rear doors would not roll down. And a lot of the people were too cheap to buy air conditioning back in like the day. Nobody would stand for that today. Kids would just suffocate and pass out in the back of these things because you couldn't roll the window down in a family car that you're going to cram like 5 or 6 people in. And that's the kind of thing like where GM was like, it's fine. And people bought them and it was fine. And there is no way in hell people would go for that today. Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's mad. It's mad that it's taken all this time, etc., etc. And I think one of the things at the moment people moan about, definitely in the UK, not massively, but it is moaned about, how cars have become so expensive. Like all cars are so expensive. When you compare whatever, new anything compared to older version of that thing. Right. But when you look at what you get in a car now, especially with all these, we have loads of regulations coming in where you're going to have adaptive cruise control and you've all got to have aircon and whatever. And you're like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Like this car is significantly more advanced. Like it's a really budget,
the bottom of the line
normal car.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we drove absolute garbage, and we were happy with it, but it was, compared to modern cars, just garbage. I mean, there were advantages. They were way easier to work on, way easier to keep going, but they were death traps. I mean, the cars I drive, I have, so like my fleet of cars right now is I got an old Beetle. Well, the carbs are off it, but I have an old Beetle and it needs work right now. I've got a Yugo, which is, of course, crap.
Nice.
Yeah, but I do like driving it. It's actually my highest horsepower car of the ones I usually drive because it's 67. And I have a Nissan PAL. You know the PAL, the Pike car?
No,
PAO. Nissan PAL. It's like a micro with a different body. It's very fun and cool. That's my my daily most reliable car. But I hit a deer in it. And I just got the body work done, but there's a cooling problem. PAO.
That must have... PAO. Okay. Oh, PAO. Yeah. Poor.
It's very different. You're going to see the difference here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got one of those, and I love it. And that, it makes 53 horsepower. But of course, it is... If I get hit in that thing, I'm gone by a modern car. I mean, it's a death trap, and everything I drive is technically that way. So my PAL is the most advanced of the one I have of the cars. But
and what year was that made in?
90. No, yeah, 90. That's 1990. They were very retro looking, but it's
does it have like a surprising amount of space inside?
It does actually. I put a lawnmower in the back of that thing, and it's got a tailgate design, so it's not a hatch. Like it drops down like a truck tailgate, and then the glass flips up. I love it actually. I put a canoe on the roof of that thing. I take my kid everywhere in it. I love it. Oh, and I've also got I have the cheapest car in the world. I have a Changli. It's a Chinese car I ordered online from off Alibaba. And it $930 plus $300 for the battery, so $1,200 for the car. It's a little electric car, 1.1 horsepower. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right, let me find this. I've got a picture. Yeah,
Changli. If you Google Changli, you'll see mine. It's red.
So, and how much did it cost?
Okay, so yeah, you can see me standing next to it right there.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, nice stickers.
Yeah, it's it was $930 for the car itself. You have to pay $300 for the batteries, so $1,200 basically for the car itself. Yeah. By the time I got it shipped to America, it came to like $3,000. But and the thing is, it's so much better than it has any right to be. It has a backup camera. It's actually got a backup. What? Yes, it has a backup camera. That body is all steel. There's curved glass. It's so much. It's got a real differential. It should be absolute garbage, but it just isn't. It's built way, way better than a $1,200 new car has any right to be. So, of course, it's only 1.1 horsepower. Yeah, that's mine right there. And it goes about 27 miles on a charge. Top speed is about 25. I've had it on a track. So I can confirm. Nice. Yeah, on the flat, you can just about get it to 25. But I live in like a college town. And in where I live, it's legal to drive it on the roads for 35 miles an hour or less. It's classified as like a neighborhood electric vehicle. So where I live, within like 2 or 3 miles of my house is like a grocery store, my kids' school, my kids' friends, and like I could get takeout. And I drive this thing almost every day, just around town, and I kind of love it because you could park it anywhere. You can just jam it in whatever little space between two cars, like they wanted people to do with smart cars, but no one ever did. And I love that thing. So yeah, I drive that thing too. But
that looks hilarious. Is it longer than a smart car?
No, it's a little bit shorter actually. It's a little bit
So
shorter.
you can do the park the wrong way
You
around
do
type thing.
nose inside a spot, and you're not sticking out into the road at all. And I do that all the time. And like, because this college town, like the little downtown area can be kind of crowded. Like you go out with a friend for a drink, everybody's circling around looking for a spot. Not me. I just shove it in behind a dumpster or between two cars, and I'm set. I love it. It's great.
That is so good. I can't, but that is amazing that you can buy.
Yeah.
I mean, even just being able to buy a car off Alibaba is hilarious. But
it came in a giant cardboard box, which is
just
amazing.
like, boom, done.
Well, it was like, it got shipped to a port. It had like a cage around it, which they took off, but it was basically in a cardboard box. So we just shoved it in the back of my friend David Tracy, my partner's pickup truck. And and we drove it to my house. And then there's actually a whole unboxing video where I'm just tearing the cardboard off.
Nice.
There's a car inside.
And
in China, they're called old man happy cars. And they're for like grandpas to like pick up stuff from the market and their kids.
Yeah.
And they're illegal in some of the bigger cities, and it's like a gray area, but there's a ton of them.
Yeah, because I remember seeing something definitely not as substantial, but it looked like a little car that generally you'd see maybe an old person mooching around in, but often kind of like a bit like a motorbike, but with a full cage situation. Yeah. How much does it weigh?
About 800, just under 900 pounds, I think. 800 and something pounds, roughly.
No idea what that is in kilos.
Oh, and I don't know. Do I have to convert it to stone?
No, stone is not a weird thing. So it's 408 kilos. That's for the listeners over here. But I was talking to someone about this the other day. I don't understand why, and I don't know. Do you have a similar sort of thing? If we're doing height, we'll do feet and inches.
Really?
But I also know centimeters because I feel like that's actually slightly more
and
useful.
You guys still do miles per hour still too, right?
We do miles per hour.
But not kilometers?
And then, so Europe kilometers. And weights, everything I think is generally kilos. Right. Apart from human weights, like of a human, it's stone and then pounds. Or occasionally people do kilos. It's really weird.
We're worse. The fact that the U.S. does no metric stuff, when objectively the way the old English system is ridiculous. Like 5,700 whatever feet in a mile is absurd. Why are we trying to remember that when metric just makes so much damn sense? I don't understand. When I was a kid in the 80s, it was always taught to us like next year we're going metric. Like this is like, get ready kids, like, cause it's going to happen. And then it just never did. Cause I don't know why. We're lazy.
And an endless issue of I come across like a hex bolt or something. And it's is it a metric or a imperial? And you're like, how am I meant to know? Like by looking at it, you just assume it's here, it's metric.
All my sockets and whatever, you just have two sets. You've just got an English, imperial, and metric. And most of my cars are foreign, so most of them are metric. But every now and then, I have like an old RV. I have like a Dodge RV, and that's all imperial. And it's an ass pain. I don't know. I don't know why we can't figure this out. Like, there's so many things that should be standardized that we're not.
It would make life a lot easier.
Electrical plugs. I mean, all kinds of things. It's just,
electrical plugs. That's such a weird one.
It's like how many? It's like a century and a half. We're pushing 2 centuries. Well, let's see, like late 1800s. You probably get widespread electrical use, and we still haven't standardized on a global plug. Like, why the hell not? U.S. could go to 220. We'd be fine. Everybody'd be fine with like. Why don't we just standardize one nice plug? You do have good plugs in the UK. They're bulky, but they are substantial. Like, and they have a fuse in them, right? Like with the big fat 3. Yeah.
Whenever I use an American style plug, sometimes there's sparks. Sometimes
they're kind of shit. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I remember as a kid. So if you pull the plug out from the wall by a little bit and you can leave a gap of the 2 metal prongs. I remember as a kid, like being bored doing homework and pulling it like a lamp plug out of the wall and just taking a penny and just dropping it. Just a massive flash of light. Yeah. And just shorted out everything. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that. It shouldn't be that easy.
And so now we've got people have electric cars. You have a little electric car. Does that plug into, I would say, a normal 3-pin, but you know,
Yeah,
a normal.
that's just a normal, in US 110 volt, just regular 3-prong outlet.
And
yeah.
because it's US 110 versus here we have 240. And I don't know what ampage or whatever that is, but presumably, can you charge nowhere near as fast as we could here?
Well,
or is it not quite like that?
So the US is a little weird. Like, we kind of have secret 240 because we got 240 coming into the house, but it gets split into outlets as 120, or I always say 110, but it's technically 120 at the outlet. Like things like dryers and like large equipment and in houses in America will be 220 powered, but the wall outlets aren't. And our amperage is I think it comes out close. You can probably, because I think the amperage, we're at 60 hertz and you guys are 50 hertz. I can't remember what the amps are. I don't know, but I think it may be it's probably a little more efficient to have a 220 outlet. But all the EVs also we don't even have a standard charger for EVs. Like,
no,
Tesla has their own charger, and then there's like 3 different other kinds.
But you don't.
What's that?
Like Teslas in the UK are the same charger as all the other cars.
Yeah, not in America. Like in America, they have their own because I don't know, because we're fiercely independent. We're idiots. Like we do. And like in the EU, didn't they make Apple have to change the little like proprietary port to USB-C now? Something like that. I don't think that was an EU thing. But it might have been. It would have been exceptionally useful if that sort of thing came in. Yeah, it should just be one damn plug. I could do like one high voltage plug, one low voltage plug, and would my life be worse? No, it'd be fine. I could be just fine.
Yeah, that'd be so. So hang on. So in your house, if you've got a dryer or a washing machine or whatever, is that separately wired in than a normal anything? A light or whatever. Well,
so out of the transformer box that leads to your house is 240 into the house. You basically have 2 different circuits. So there's basically special 220 outlets that are just for that kind of equipment. So you couldn't just plug it. There's special outlets just for that stuff, usually in like a garage or like a laundry room. In my house is weird. Like in our living room, we have 220 outlet behind the couch, which we think someone had put in for a window air conditioner before the house had central air.
Yeah.
But it's still there. So if I really wanted to run an arc welder in my living room, I could just plug it in there and it'd be great. But so there's basically 2 kinds of outlets, and you're going to have like 90% 110 outlets and then like a small fraction of these 220 outlets in your house.
That is incredibly
So in theory, you guys can plug in a dryer anywhere you want, right?
Anything, anywhere. You could charge, like I could charge my electric car from any plug in the house anywhere, and it would come out at 240.
Cannot do that in America. Yeah, like you have to have usually you have to have like a special outlet wired up in your garage. Holy shit, I didn't realize how good you guys had it there. You just plug it in anywhere.
I can't believe how bad you've got it in terms of just not being able to plug something into a wall.
We're absolute animals. It's barely living. Yeah. I don't get it.
So you're writing for Jalopnik. You're smashing out like 3 articles a day. How?
Yep.
I mean, where do you get your ideas? Do you like go, okay, I need to sit down and research a bunch of stuff, or you just do life and then ideas come? Because that's a lot of articles.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, I'm aware of car things a lot, so I'm just paying attention. So, and the big trick I learned is always have somewhere to write the ideas down, because you won't remember them. So I'll walk by a car and something will strike me about that car and I'll think, and so I'll write it down in usually right now we use like Slack for our messaging, and I just use my own like you have your own little channel. What I like about that is I can put it in my phone and then I have access to it in my computer. Like the trick is write it somewhere where you can get it everywhere. I used to write on paper, but you'd lose it or wash it in your pants or whatever. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I write it down. And also I do a lot of like old books are great. Like I get a lot of books from like thrift stores and things like that. And there's still lots of things in the world that aren't on the internet, and you can learn, and everything leads to paths. Like you learn about something, you'll see a name, and then you'll look up that name and it'll lead to a whole other weird path. And then before you know it, you've hit something else. Like, for example, cross-pollinating your interests works really well too. I just wrote an article for the Autopian about how the guy who designed the Jeep Wagoneer was the same dude who was responsible for arcade video games, basically.
Oh, really?
Like, so
Wow.
a guy named Dave Nutting, he worked for Brooks Stevens, who was the design house that worked with AMC Nash to design cars. And it was his idea to come up with the idea of the Wagoneer, which is really, in a lot of ways, the template for the modern SUV, where you say, basically, let's take a 4x4 truck chassis, put a station wagon-like body on it, but make it a little taller and make it luxurious. That's basically 90% of the car market in America right now. And it was all this guy, Dave Nutting's idea. He also was building like coin-operated like quiz machines and things like that. And then Nolan Bushnell, the guy who founded Atari, came to him, and they worked together to make the first actual stand-up arcade video game called Computer Space, which was built under Dave Nutting's company. And then, you know, they went on to found Atari. But this same dude, one dude, did these two wildly different things. And it was, you know, so like just noting things like that and seeing like Dave Nutting's name in one place and then remembering, wait a minute, I've seen that name before.
Yeah.
And then digging through, and then boom, you've got an article that's interesting. And, you know, so like, you know, you just got to be, your mind just always has to be open. And the thing is, you can force so many things into a car context if you really want to. Like, you find something interesting, and if you dig hard enough, you're going to find something related to cars involved in it there somewhere.
And I guess the beauty of the platforms that you were putting it out onto is it's not one article a month. So therefore it has to be some massive, big, all-encompassing, super interesting for everyone article. It's like, no, I'm making lots of the content. Each one has some interesting stuff in it, but I can follow all of these crazy avenues. So you must have like learnt and discovered so much stuff over that number of articles. Like, do you even remember the things that you did way back when? Or
sometimes I do, and sometimes I'll Google something and I realize, oh, holy shit, I wrote about that like 8 years ago. Yeah, so like that does happen sometimes, especially for like little obscure cars. I'll like find something like, what the hell is this thing? And I'll be all delighted, and I'll Google it and I was, oh yeah, I wrote about that already. So I mean, that is a thing that happens. I don't remember everything, but I remember, you know, you'd be surprised how much actually sticks in there. It's,
well, I guess if you devote enough time, and one of the things that people always say about remembering stuff is writing it down. Well, writing an article is another level, because you've got to research it and then refine it and whatever, put it in. So I guess it's going to stick. So you were at Jalopnik for, was it 10 years or something like that?
10 years, basically at 20, like a late 2011, maybe a little bit over. And then I left to found the Autopian this year. I left to Jalopnik in February.
And what spurred that change?
So there's a couple of things. Look, they gave me complete freedom at Jalopnik. I could write big articles, smart articles, everything. Like I didn't have to pitch anything for years. I had complete freedom. I loved working at Jalopnik. I loved the people I worked with. That was great. But I fundamentally wasn't in control of how the site worked or looked. And it was getting more and more cluttered with ads. People were complaining a lot about the finding stories, how it was running on their phone. It was to a point where they couldn't comfortably see the work I was doing. And that was starting to bother me. And I have no say in that and how they were, you know, because it was sold. If you started as a Gawker site, and then there was the whole Hulk Hogan thing and the Peter Thiel thing, and then it got sold to Univision, and then it got bought by the current owners now, who's Geo Media. And, you know, Geo Media is a company who they want to make money fundamentally. You can't fault them for that. That's the whole point of it. But that also just meant a lot of decisions that I don't think I would have chosen if I were in charge. And they also did something where they started hiding the images on a lot of articles after a certain point, so they wouldn't have to deal with potential rights issues. And that bothered me because it meant years and years of work I had done. Because I pay, as a designer and artist, I pay a lot of attention to the visual look of what I put out. I don't just write stories. I make sure they look cool, and I'll often do hand drawings for things. So because of this blanket policy where they were just going to hide these images for all these articles, that's a lot of work I had done that is going to be much more difficult for people to see. And that just reminded me, I don't own any of that stuff. All those 6,700 articles I wrote are not really mine anymore. And that's kind of an alarming thing. That's a lot of person, and it's not like I'm writing news stories. I'm writing my ideas about things by and large. Some of it are news and some of it are whatever, but a lot of these things I did are like goofball ideas I came up with and put on paper, like if squids ruled the earth, what their cars would be like, for example, and they were drawing. So when these images started to disappear, I realized, you know what? I don't think this is sustainable. I can't put all this effort into something that fundamentally I have no ownership of. And
what was the reason for, you're saying copyright issues, but as a sort of newsy type website, are you not allowed to use images as like commentary anyway?
I think we are. The problem is it's none of that's super clear. And I think instead of taking the time to really, it felt like a sloppy solution. So like, just to avoid any trouble, they just hid all these images for all these articles past a certain point. And, you know, that includes stuff that maybe was not properly cited in places. I don't know. But it also included a lot of stuff that I myself had drawn or made graphically for that site that I 100% know was not stolen because I made them. That's most of what I did. And it didn't matter. They didn't go through and try to flag the ones that were okay. They just hid them all. And I didn't like that idea. You know, that was just, it just didn't feel right. So
I mean, that is a tricky situation for you specifically. Like I remember someone said to me a long time ago, and I paid some attention and not much attention, and it wasn't massively applicable, but if you're writing stuff and you're on a platform that you don't have control of, one day it could go under, someone could change this situation, which has happened to you, or you know, all these sorts of things happen, and then all the stuff you've written has gone. And
exactly. Like, that's a large body. That's your body of work, your creative work that is potentially not something you have control over. You're right. It could disappear. They could go under and just shelve all that stuff and it's just gone. And that's an alarming thing for the amount of work that gets put in. So, you know, there was that. And, you know, we had a lot of ideas about how we'd like a site run. And David Tracy is another longtime writer at Jalopnik. He's an ex-engineer, very technical, great guy. He and I always got on really well. We did a lot of stuff together, and we were a good mix. I'm kind of in the arty goofball side. He is from the more rational engineer side. And so together we kind of formed a pretty decent whole. So we decided we're going to try to start our own website. And but, you know, money is a big deal. So neither of us are in a position where we could just ride on savings or whatever. We just weren't there. So we were talking to different venture firms and things like that. None of them sounded that great. We looked into getting loans, but from my past, I've started companies on a shoestring budget, and I know how stressful and hard that is. And I didn't really want to do that again because it's just hard to make the quality we wanted. So thankfully, my friend Bo Bachman, who actually I had he wrote the preface to my book here. He's the guy who runs a very large dealer network in America called Galpin Auto. And they're like the biggest Ford dealer in America. He also was on Pimp My Ride. He has Galpin Auto Sports. He's a guy who just loves cars. And I'd been corresponding with him for a long time because he shares an interest in weird cars that I have. So sometimes I'll find some strange car and I would have written about it, and Bo would have actually physically went out and bought an example of that car.
Nice.
So based on things I'd written. So, and his car tastes are kind of parallel to mine in a lot of ways. He's got his own other interests, but he just likes some weird, interesting stuff. And we met years ago at an event and hit it off. And I'd done some research for him for various TV shows that he's done. So I realized, well, David and I want to do this. And we thought Bo might be interested in this. And he actually was, because he kind of wanted to be getting into a media space. And he kind of had the same complaints about Jalopnik that a lot of people had. And he just had a very similar vision. So thanks to Bo, we were able to put together a real company. And, and this was like late, we started talking about it, I guess late last year. And then, it kind of got real. And then David and I left Jalopnik in February. And then we really worked to get this thing together. And, and so now we've got, so now there's the Autopian, which is, basically, David and I are the David's technically the editor-in-chief because I hate doing that stuff, but we kind of run the tone of the site. Right now we're still small. It's basically David and I are the only full-timers. We have one basically full-timer, Thomas Hundel, who does a lot of writing for us, and we're trying to hire more people, but we've got a great set of freelancers. Like, one of the things we wanted to do was get experts, like real, like not journalists. We wanted people who were actual car designers, actual engineers, actual people in the industry. And so we have a really strong stable of designers and engineers and other people who actually know what they're talking about, who are writing for us on a regular basis. Car museums have like a regular column with us. We've got a designer who will take your crazy ideas and draw them. We have a designer who has to stay anonymous because he works for an OEM who writes all kinds of great insidery things about the car business. We have the guy who was the lead engineer on the Ford GT wrote about how badly he screwed up one crucial part. You never see like that kind of thing on other sites.
That's super
like
cool.
Where the literal engineer who was responsible for a recall of the Halo car of one of the biggest car companies is writing like, I screwed this up, and he just a full mea culpa, and it was a fascinating article. So it's we're getting the site that we think the readers really want and that we personally just want to read. And it's been great. A crap ton of work, but it's been great.
That is a really interesting take. We're starting to see a little bit of that over here. You've probably come across it. Well, maybe it started as an Instagram account called the Intercooler, or it was Drive Nation first, and now it's called the Intercooler with Andrew Frankel and Dan Prosser. But they've sort of started doing a similar thing of getting some actual industry people. But that is absolutely the way to do it, because for so long we've had journalists writing about stuff that they might know a lot about, but actually it's not the same as having a designer, an engineer, a racing driver, whatever, someone who's, it's their profession and they're sharing some writing about it.
And they have lifetimes of experiences.
Yeah.
And like we started like our engineer, like our main engineer writer, Hubert Mees, he's a retired engineer who worked for Ford and Tesla and Jaguar. And like, so he has a lifetime of experience, and now he's writing because he just wants to, which is the best possible situation. He has interesting stories and he wants to tell people about them because he likes this stuff. He cares. He loves the interaction with the commenters. And that's the kind of community we want to build. We want to make it so. In one interview, I compared it to the Protestant Reformation in the sense of like, you're getting rid of the intermediaries. Like there's no more, you don't have to go through a journalist to get to the source of things. So it's just commenters can ask the guy who designed the Ford GT himself in an article, why did you make this decision? And they'll get an answer. And that kind of thing I love. And then, the community at Jalopnik was extremely strong and a big part of why we like to do this. And we want to build up as much of that as possible. So the comment section is as important as the top section with the article. Like, people's discussions are important. Us interacting with the commenters is important. David and I, just because of how busy we've been trying to get this going, haven't been able to interact quite as much, but we've been trying. Like, once a week we do, like at the end of the week, we've done like a how's it going column, how are we doing? And then we really try to pay attention to what people want. Even at the beginning, people complained about the typeface, for example. So we just changed it. We're going to listen and pay attention. We also have almost no ads right now, which can't stay that way forever.
I was about to say.
But it is a nice, refreshing change from like a really ad-heavy kind of site.
How does a website like yours then sort of become sustainable long term? Like, how do you manage that? And have you seen with like Jalopnik, it's changed or whatever, and people are trying to make money or make more money or whatever. What's your sort of strategy?
Well, we have a plan. I promise. We do have a plan. Right now, we're in a phase of the plan where we decided we want to build our audience and community first before we start, because we have to have something to sell. So before we start getting sponsorships and ads and that kind of thing, we want to make sure we build up a community so we can prove there's a real thing of value here, which I absolutely believe there is. We passed 1 million page views after our first month, just like last week. Every day, like we're getting more and more people. Like, it's going the right direction. And we think we're going to be able to get we're looking into a more of a sponsorship model for things, just to keep things from becoming overly ad heavy on the page, which we don't want to do. We want the user experience to remain strong. So we have a few other ideas about how to make that happen. We have the luxury of a little bit of time to do this, which I know a lot of sites wouldn't. So we want to make the most of that and make sure we really get this product where we want it to be first. So we've got a few different options that we're still playing with. Honestly, that's not the part I'm focused on. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'm trusting. We have a good business guy who's like paying attention to this stuff, and I'm going to let him do his thing because I've learned I'm not great at that stuff. But I can promise you there's an interesting plan. And the key part of that plan is the user experience is always paramount. And we'd rather not go to something like a subscription model because we want as much reach as possible. Like, we don't want to lock people out by having to have a subscription. We want everybody to be able to click on an interesting article and read it. And we want that experience to be good. So I hope it's going to be sustainable. I think it will be. And I'm trusting that there's clever people coming up with stuff.
Yeah. And I think that balance is key. Like, it's very easy as you're starting out, like to go, okay, we need some revenue, so you just start putting ads in, but actually the ads are like a bit shit and they're not that relevant because you've not really got the right people, and then you almost sort of put off the opportunity. You don't, but like, of down the line going, actually it's way better with us if we can work with 4 companies and help them and provide something for them in a really nice professional way. But then your content, it can just be content rather than just, stuff
and that's what we're thinking. And initially I was the one saying we got to monetize this and get some ad services on there, and I was talked out of it because they all had a much clearer vision close to what you're talking about. We're like, that it doesn't make sense for us to just dump these little crappy ads on there. It's just going to degrade a user experience. We just got to build it up the right way, and then we'll be able to get the right kinds of sponsorships and ads and things that will be high value and low impact for the end reader. And we do have one sponsor. We have Optima batteries, which is nice. So it's not like we have nothing right now. But so there's
it's such a tricky balance. I've got it. Let's say with the podcast, the audio side has one major sponsor, and then the video side goes on YouTube and there's ads and stuff. But it's that thing of going, how often do you put ads? Do you even put ads? Because you're like, well, you kind of want it to grow. Does it make a difference? I don't know. And then when to put it in, go back through, etc. That's probably one I need to think about.
It's tough because like, you've got to ride that line of what, you can't degrade that user experience. Like, they'll accept things. And in fact, our users have written like, we'll do more ads, or start a Patreon or whatever. Like, people want to help because they like what they're getting and they don't want it to go away. People do understand that things aren't free. So as long as you respect your readers that way, I think there's a point where you guys, where it can be met, where like the needs of the site and the needs of the readers can find that balance. And that's what we're shooting for. And hopefully we're gonna get there. But we're not going to do a bunch of horrible programmatic ads all over the site. That's just not gonna happen. So don't worry.
And then you just get people get to the homepage and then they're gone. They're like, nah. They don't get engaged.
That's what we were coming away from, and we that's just not the road we're gonna go down.
Yeah. Have you noticed, like, let's say some like Jalopnik, what was, when you were sort of leaving, what do you know, any idea what like site views and stuff like for a website like that are?
It's big. I mean, Jalopnik is a juggernaut. At its peak, so in like 2018, 2019, somewhere in that range, like when it was at its absolute peak, it was like 6 million uniques a month or something. Like, it was huge. I mean, it was like millions and millions uniques a month. And during that period, David and I were the leaders in I think David was at the top actually of leaders in content wise. So we understand what people want to see. And David's actually better at this than me. He's very good at crafting headlines in a way, because there's a weird art to it of making it, putting just enough information, and and they always read a little weird sometimes, but they always work. David knows exactly what he's doing for that stuff, so I let him handle that kind of thing, because there's a method to it, and he's definitely figured it out. So the traffic was huge, and I think currently it definitely has dropped, although I don't know where it is right now.
Yeah.
They don't share that information with me anymore. But it's still very much a juggernaut. And so we've got we're starting from scratch in a lot of ways. We have to get past. We have to, like, right now, most of our traffic is very organic. People type in the Autopian or search for it. So we have a lot of room with like SEO and search and other things to grow that, because right now it's dedicated people who have followed us who are forming the core of that community, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted to start with. But it is it's going to be an uphill battle, but I feel good about how we've gotten this thing started.
And then as time grows, as more articles go out, you're going to get more
staff and more articles, right? Yeah, like once, because like right now we're putting out about as many articles to hit the quality level we want. We're putting out about as many articles as we can with the limited staff we have. Yeah. As we staff up, that'll increase. That'll get more people, and it'll help. And David and I have an interesting balance of like on the quality thing. Like, I'm very much a get something out there. It's good enough. Just have fun, get it out there. I'm like a 75% quality guy. David is a 120% quality guy. So we bang heads a lot, but that's actually what works, because we kind of arrive between the two of us at about an 85 level, which is great. 85 is really good. It gives you the information we need, but it still gets done. And that's a key thing. So David's about get it right, and I'm about get it out. And those are two elements that you absolutely have to have.
Yeah,
but
that
it does
must
make
be
for some,
tricky for some people. I think if you've got that, I want it to be, let's say, the top level of quality. Like you said, you just don't get stuff done, and content out there is better than content not out there.
100%, exactly.
Ish, but pretty much.
Yeah, for the most part, that is true. You want it; people have to see it to enjoy it. Even so, and but the pressure for that quality there is crucial, because it does mean we're not going to put out crap. But we still have to put stuff out. So it's a balance there. And then as we staff up, we'll have more time for longer term stories, for like bigger, deeper dive stories. And I've got a list of things I want to dig deeper into. David has a list of things he wants to dig deeper into. And once we have that, then we can do things that are like really extremely high quality, extremely in-depth things, as well as the shorter, quicker things. So it's an interesting balance to have. And time is there's always a pressure to get stuff up. Yeah. So even before today, I had to stay up late last night making sure I had enough to fill the hole, because David's actually on a press trip today. So I'm running the show. So it's to get this couple hour block of time, I stayed up till 3 last night writing something, so I would make sure I'd had something scheduled ready to go.
Fair play. Thanks for doing that.
No, I'm happy to do it. I don't mind. But it's this is the startup thing. There's just skeleton crew right now.
Hectic at the start. Yeah. But I think it will probably keep being like that. But definitely,
you're probably right. Actually, yeah.
But no, it sounds like it's going well. The sort of American versus US. I'm trying to think of sort of things that we do totally. Are there other things you look at that come out or happen over here that you're just like, I don't understand, or how is this so different, or is it less so?
Like for you, well, like UK in particular, or Europe in general, or just anywhere?
A bit of both.
I mean, I always kind of preferred European automotive culture in a way, because I like small and weird cars, frankly, and those are just a lot more common in Europe. Things like, and certain things like stick shift, manual transmission adoption here is dwindling to nothing, and in Europe, in the UK, and other places, it's still a significant amount. So you guys have a lot of things that are weirdly coveted by a lot of us in America, like the idea of the manual wagon, is almost impossible to find here. And I think people would roll their eyes at it there. Like the fact that you guys have Skodas and Dacias and things like that. Cheap cars are coveted here. Like I love the what's the little Dacia SUV thing, which is the that thing. I love. Yeah, well, yeah, the Senderos and like when all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of forbidden fruit that you guys have that we think is exciting. Well, I mean, I don't know about I think is exciting. So that's
so funny that is such a thing, because I just went on holiday to Greece, and my rental car was like a Fiat Estate, so wagon, and it was manual because that's the cheapest, and that was just like the cheapest, biggest car we could get to put our sort of family stuff in. And then I was sitting at lunch, and there was a table next to us, and it was some Americans that had come over, and they were telling one of them was telling another story about how he'd come to Europe, got a rental car, and it was a stick, or a manual, and he had no idea how to drive it. So the other person in the car was driving it, got stopped by the police, and they're like, "But you're the one insured. You have to drive the car." And he's like, "I can't drive the car." I'm like, well, what are you even doing?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I mean, but the thing is, it seems like a recent thing, although growing up, neither of my parents could drive stick, and they were both born in like the 30s, and they were driving cars in the 50s. But it's amazing how long in America you could get by without learning how to drive stick. Like, I bought my first car when I was 15. I bought this 68 Beetle when I was 15. Before I could even drive. And I had to find like a friend of my dad's to drive it back to our house because no one in my family knew how to drive stick. It's crazy. But you know what's actually going on right now that when you guys talk to David, definitely bring this up. People are freaking out in the UK because of your MOT. They want to switch to every other year instead of every year. Yeah. So David thinks this is the most ridiculous argument ever. For one thing, he lives in Michigan, which has no inspections at all. Nothing. You can literally drive rust held together by paint on a highway in Michigan, and everybody is like, that's just fine. But he thinks like every other year is completely fine. Even in Germany, apparently they only do it every other year. You guys will be fine, is what he's saying. No one's gonna die if you do your MOT every other year instead of
That's an interesting one. I think it sounds, going from 1 year to 2 sounds so crazy, because it's like, double the time. Like, but
what's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know whether population density makes a big difference as well, but I don't know. For me, it's as like a concept, I don't see why you would do it, because it's like, for the people that are doing the MOT, it's business, fine. For the people that own the cars, it's not a big cost. Like, if you're buying fuel and whatever, like, the cost of an MOT is a small amount, and you get the warnings. There's so many people I know that drive around, not loads of people, but they haven't got a clue. They have not got a clue. There might be an engine warning light, and you're like, what's that? Like, oh, it's a light of an engine. Like, yeah, cool, whatever. Do another 20,000 miles, and like having the MOT. Someone says like, this wheel is going to fall off. You have to do something. You're not allowed to drive the car until you change it. Right. And just having that little nudge, I think is great.
Yeah. I mean, I see the point there too. I don't know. We live differently in America, though. I think if you want a fundamental difference, for whatever reason, a lot of America, like car culture, like, we're more willing to put up with, if it's like cheap, we're willing to like be happy with it and really revel in it. Like, our low fuel costs even though it's bad now for Americans, it's nothing like what fuel costs are in Europe. And everybody's going crazy because, gas is like $4 a gallon. But I know it's like in Europe, it's much, much different. But like there's this weird mentality in America, like, where we want to be able to do dumb shit. Like, if you keep us safe, that almost gets Americans angry, and it's not rational at all. But again, I mean, the reason I'm so interested in cars as a subject is because fundamentally they are not rational things. They may be the least rational big purchases that anybody makes. We buy cars for absurd reasons, and Americans maybe even more so than most. Like, and the idea, so like David's idea that like David has a dozen rusty Jeeps, like an MOT like thing for every year would be crippling. It wouldn't work. And me too. I've got like 6 cars in my yard, and I doubt if I had to keep all of them up to the standards that MOT had, I probably wouldn't be able to pull that off either. And that would bother me.
You don't have to do it.
You don't have to do
the option. No. So if
Oh,
you want to drive them, you do.
yeah.
But if you don't want to drive them, if you're like, they're just going to sit in my garden for 5 years whilst I
Yeah.
work it out, you just register them as like off the road.
No. Okay.
And then
But
it's
you don't
fine.
have an option to drive something unsafe.
Not legally.
Because
And-
in
and,
America, that's a right, not just an option.
yeah. I want a
That's right.
bathtub on wheels with
Yes,
a V8.
I want a bathtub on wheels. And yeah, and depending on, like, some states, of course, are more restrictive than others. California,
Yeah.
for example, has more, closer to like rational kind of rules and things. Things like Michigan and in parts of the Midwest, even where I am in North Carolina, if you actually look at the rules for what you need on a car, I'm not even sure you need 2 taillights out here. I'm not even sure you need, like, you can get by with some pretty minimal crap if you really want to. My Yugo, for example, is marginal in an awful lot of ways, but I'm still driving it around. It's hard to argue if that's a good idea, but at the same time, I love that I can do it. But it's not a smart idea. It's not smart. I don't know what that's a. This is an American.
I get the ethos. Like, I understand I want to be able to drive. If I think I can drive it, and I think, you know what, I'll give it a go, I should be allowed to. I understand that. I
want to be clear. I'm not 100% endorsing this concept or not endorsing it. I'm too saturated in this culture.
Yeah.
To really look at it objectively or rationally, because I can see that it's not. The rational thing is check your car as often as you could check it to make sure the wheels don't fall off or you're not bolting something to rust or whatever. That's the rational thing. At the same time, I think if I had to do it, it would bother me. And there's no way to make that. There's no way to square that. It doesn't make any sense.
I think I did the gumball a long time ago. I've done it a few times, but it's in various forms. And I did one which was East Coast to West Coast of the States. And I could see how there was a lot of bit in the middle of that where, like, there's not really any cars. There's not really any corners. Like, yeah, you don't need rules.
Exactly.
And there are not a lot of rules.
Wyoming, like, what are you going to hit? Like, it'll be fine.
Exactly. If your car smashes, whatever, you're not going to hit anything serious, and you're not going to hit anyone else. Whereas, like, here, you literally can drive from one end of the country and you could be through, like, people's houses the entire way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, density. You're right. I think density is absolutely an issue with this because we just have a lot of space, a lot of open space.
Yeah.
And, like, you physically can't drive 2 days straight in the UK like you can here. No. And still be in America. Like,
on one road in a straight line.
On what I did. So when I moved from LA to North Carolina, I bought this old 77 Dodge RV, which is fantastic. By the way, there's no greater luxury than a car you can just pull to the side of the road and take a comfortable shit in. It's definitely
nice. I like that.
It's wonderful. And so I drove this old thing, and I was literally, you go on I-40 at one end, and then you don't stop until you get to North Carolina. Yeah. It's an absurd thing if you think about it. You would be halfway into the Atlantic if you tried that in the UK.
Yeah. I saw recently it was someone had set a distance record for an EV, and they did a coast to coast. It was a really weird record. I think it was in a Taycan, and it was a charging time record. So it was like they did coast to coast in a Taycan, and they charged for, it was like 2.5 hours or something in total. Now,
wow, really?
They gamed the system quite a lot because it was in partnership with one of the charging networks, and they only charged at the super fast ones, and there was a lot of it's impressive considering the amount of miles.
Like Invasion of Normandy level of planning out, though.
Yeah. But they only charged from like 0 to 40% or something, every time, and then did that. But the sort of fuel economy, or whatever that is in EV terms, I don't know what the
MPGE thing,
MPGE, electric efficiency-ness,
right?
Like, to do that, we looked at it and was like, there's just no way you could do that in the UK, because you can't drive at that speed, whatever speed they did, I don't know, 50 or something, without having to stop or go around a corner or any of those things to get anywhere near the level of efficiency that they did. And it made me think about, you see, particularly in the States, and people do it here, but not so much, these sort of hypermiling. and the figures people get out of this guy. I think he had like some sort of truck with like a V8 and managed to get 60 mpg or 50 mpg. It's something ridiculous.
I've done that. I won a hypermiling challenge that Audi did a few years back. It was in one of their diesels before Dieselgate. It was like an Audi diesel, and it was like a challenge thing where like all these journalists got the cars, sealed the gas tanks, and then we were going from like Arizona to San Diego. Anyway, I did about 836 miles or something like that on one tank of diesel. Hypermiling is the most god-awful sort of driving I've ever done. I'm very good at it, but I hate every single second of it because it's like, it was hot in the summer, windows are up, no climate control, your shoes off so I could feather the throttle to the exact precise, keep it like right at 2000 RPM, and you have to like shift. Sometimes you shift into neutral if you want to accelerate down a grade, and then you put it. It's awful. It's like math in tedium and everything. It's so bad. We were actually on the highway at one point reading about 0 on our, like, you're 0 miles left, but we still had a long ways to go, doing like 48 on the highway, and a cop pulls up behind us and over his loudspeaker yells, "You have to go faster." And then he like stayed behind us and made us do like 60 miles an hour. And we thought we were dead, but we actually were able to still pull it off. But it's such awful driving. It is joyless. It is absolutely joyless. And I respect the people who get super into it and put cardboard on their Geo Metros and make them into teardrops or whatever, but it's god awful. But I don't know if you could do that in the UK, really.
Definitely not to the same level. Yeah. You can obviously try it, but like all the things, like not braking.
What's the furthest you can drive up and down in the UK? Like from south to all the way up.
The thing is, you can't do it on one road.
Oh, really? Okay.
So the road network just doesn't work like...
Yeah, it's not like a grid.
It's not just a grid and then from one to the top. You've got some loops and whatnot. I don't know. I have no idea. 700 miles?
Yeah.
I don't know. Wow. An absolute guess from like maybe 800. I don't know. But
whenever I talk to friends from Europe about a road trip, and I'll mention it's like, I'm going to drive like 12 hours today or whatever, for all of them, they can't fathom that that's just not that big a deal, and you're still not where you need to go. Like 12 hours in most of Europe, you've changed entire cultures and histories. Yes. And in the U.S., it's just like maybe they're eating different parts of the pig where you end up. That's it. Maybe.
You've seen like 6 strip malls and gun shops and fireworks stores, and that's it.
That's it. Avail yourself to the fireworks stores, because those do vary state by state. You can't get fireworks in every state.
No, if you do a 12-hour journey in Europe, if you did try to do multiple days of that sort of level of driving, you have gone through so many countries, so many languages, so many different types of cars.
Right now, you're basically, I don't even know if you could, because there's a war zone blocking you in the long direction. So,
True. You'd have to be doing some loops.
Yeah. You have to pop down Italy and Scandinavia. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. Before, I thought we sort of slowly tailor this off. But at one point earlier, you mentioned you've got a book.
Yes.
I was not aware of this. My research was poor. Talk to me about this book, the concept, and a little bit about it.
So another one of my interests is autonomy, because I was covering a lot of autonomy, because I cover, I'm interested in the technical side, but more I'm interested in the conceptual side, because it's a fundamental shift in the way that we deal with cars and transportation. And what I think is interesting is it's actually a return to the pre-automotive era. Like back in, before cars were common, we used animals to drive us around. A horse and a cart is a semi-autonomous vehicle, because a horse knows how to it. Horses, I don't know if you're aware, were moving around on their own long before there were people. They know how to do this. When you're behind the reins of a horse, you don't have to tell it how to keep in the lane. It knows that. It has a brain and eyeballs and all that stuff. And so for all those centuries, we were driving semi-autonomous vehicles. You would guide a horse. You would tell it which direction you'd want to go. And then that would be, but you didn't actually have to know how to drive. So then, like, when the very first cars came out, so, there was like 1769, you have Cugnot's steam drag. And then the first real example of like a private car, I think, would be in 1803. There was a thing called the London steam carriage. It was, I think Richard Trevithick made it. So it was basically the first purpose-built passenger car. And there's a great recounting of them driving it. And he like runs into a bunch of hedges and things and kind of has like an early car wreck because I think primarily we didn't have any idea how to do this stuff. Even if he was going at like maybe 15 miles an hour, 10 or 15. But when it comes to us tracking things, all of our experience is like walking or running pace. And, the management of how to deal with a larger vehicle, it was not obvious. But we did learn that, and we've learned it really well. And cars became this almost prosthetic-like device that we wear. Like you make a physical motion with your foot or your arms, and then it just gets translated into these larger motions of a car. It's prosthetic. It is still a physical body doing something. So autonomy means we're switching back to the point where we're passenger again. We're not fully in control. And I think there's a lot that we could lose. Like, if this is just a blip, if human driving is just like this 150-year blip before everything becomes autonomous, then like the idea of traveling is going to change a lot, because it'll, like, when you drive on a long road trip, you are engaged the whole time. You're aware. You're moving through one point to another. You see the scenery change. You're aware the whole time. Once you're a passenger, that all changes. It becomes more like air travel or slow teleporting, because you start at one position, you do whatever the hell during the journey, and then you end up somewhere else. You're no longer engaged in that journey. You're going to be reading or on your phone or sleeping or masturbating or whatever you're going to do in that car, but you're not actively engaged with the process of traveling. So I think there's something we should be aware of this before we go whole hog into this, because there's value to that. And then the idea of productivity gets brought up a lot. Like, they always show like people, in like autonomous car, like promotional and propaganda, they're doing things, they're getting work done. Why do we want that so badly? Like, as it stands right now with mobile phones and constant communication, there's really only two places you can guarantee to be left alone. And that's if you're on the toilet or driving, because you're not going to hopefully. I mean, actually, people probably work on their toilet too. They probably are on their phone looking at stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you're driving, you have to have some degree of focus. You can't be expected to actually do work, really, unless you're a truck driver or something. But you know what I mean. And what's nice about the process of driving is it uses a portion of your brain that's like muscle memory to actually guide and control the car, but you have a lot free too. That's why you can listen to music or a podcast or talk to a friend, and you still have that part of your mind free. And it's a great way. Like, sometimes I'll drive just to think about ideas and come up with things, because by giving your rest of your mind something physical to do, it frees up the other part. And we'll lose that when it comes to autonomy, because then it'll be no different than sitting at your desk or wherever the hell you normally do stuff. And I think there's value to those things, and I don't want to see them go. And at the same time, I think there's all kinds of potential for autonomous vehicles in ways that maybe we haven't even thought of. Like, a big premise of this book is that we need to think about autonomous cars as robots, literal robots, because they will be the first mass deployment of a robot that is capable of actually being dangerous. Like, we have Roombas and things now, but they're not going to hurt you. And we've certainly had industrial robots for a long time, but they're sequestered off in very specific areas. I mean, deployed into mainstream society with no real restrictions, a 4,000-pound autonomous car is going to be an interesting thing to deal with. And I don't see a lot of thought about how that affects the overall structure of society happening. And the path we're going down now, I don't actually think is that great. I think level 2 autonomy is garbage, because anything that demands that you both give up control of the car to drive while simultaneously remaining constantly aware and ready to take over is not something humans are good at. And there have been studies. There was this, was it Macklemore study in 1948, this thing called the vigilance problem, where he was like monitoring people who were monitoring radar screens and realizing when something's doing most of the work, people are just not good at devoting a lot of attention, which is why we've had issues of people crashing into things on Tesla Autopilot that they should have seen or whatever, because you're just not. I mean, it's not auto. You're supposed to be ready to go, and they have all kinds of warnings, but it doesn't matter if it's doing most of the work. And the conundrum is, the better a level 2 system is, the more dangerous it is, because the better it is at most of the stuff, lulling you into the sense of security that it's doing things until it can't, and then you're really not prepared. And level 3 is even worse. Level 3 autonomy is considered where it can have full control and you don't have to pay attention except when it does. And I've written about this and talked to experts. There is no clear parameters of like, how does it warn you? How much time should it give you? What are the parameters where it's okay and where it isn't? Right now, level 3 is limited to like traffic jam speeds, and like it's 37 miles an hour maximum, at least in European law. But they want to expand that, and nobody's done the work of figuring out, well, how does this actually work with the human behind the wheel? So,
hasn't Mercedes they've said with the next, I can't remember, it's like S-Class or whatever, they're like, oh, it's going to have level 3, and they've said they're going to accept the liability when it's engaged. Now, that in itself is a whole like another can of worms. I think I find it a really interesting topic because of all of the, not necessarily the tech, because the tech is what it is and it's either there or not there, etc. But it's all of these sort of like kind of philosophical questions of like, who's responsible? Who makes the decision? As humans, we make all of the decisions. You know, the sort of, I guess the conundrum that comes up a lot of the time is like, let's just say you're driving down the road 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, whatever, someone steps out or two people step out.
There's the trolley problem kind of.
And you're like, which way does it go? You know, who does it kill? And I mean, all of that sort of stuff. And
the worst case scenario, I can imagine it checking credit ratings, you know, deciding who's going to get like, I don't know what that criteria is. Does it prioritize the inhabitants of the people inside the car over the people outside the car?
Yeah. And like, the more expensive a car you're in, does it value you more as a person? Like, how does it make all these decisions?
It could. Maybe it'll check your Instagram account and do a quick evaluation of what it thinks of you.
Yeah.
Are you that attractive?
Your social score in China, that is heavily ranked.
Yeah.
And then add this tech into America being America, the Hummer, the electric Hummer, which is obviously what should be made in an EV form, 4.5 tons or whatever it is.
Yeah, you want it, nice and wide.
Nice and wide, big brick. Like, that thing should be driving around. It's mad. It is such a rocky road.
And I feel like there's a big push to get these problems solved without thinking about them on a larger systems level. Like, they're working on the individual car's ability to detect their environment and understand it move. But I don't think that's the right angle. Like, for example, right now, I think the one problem all AV companies should be working on is, how do you get your car off the road if something goes wrong? Nobody does this right now. Right now, if you're in a level 2 car, or even most level 3 cars, and it's trying to get your attention to take over and it can't, for example, the most they do is put on their hazard lights and come to a stop in an active traffic lane, which is an awful idea. It's a terrible idea. If you were on the highway and you were having a problem with something, you would never think, I'll just stop in this lane of traffic and put my hazard lights on. It'll be fine. Nobody would do that. And that's literally what all of the cars on the market today do. That's not a solution. And the problem is getting off the road onto a shoulder. If the car is only going to need to do it if something's compromised, a sensor problem, it needs your attention. For whatever reason, it decided it can't continue. So it's already impaired, and it has to do something complicated like finding a clear spot off the road. How the hell do we solve that? I think it's going to take infrastructure help, something outside the car itself to help it figure out how to get a car out of an active traffic lane. But nobody seems to want to do that. They all, in America at least, they think it would take forever. There's no way to get every state to agree on it. We're going to be boned, so let's just not do it that way. But what else are you going to do? You have to get cars out of the way if these things are going to be useful. China may have better luck with this stuff because the nature of their system is so much more centralized. They could have, beacon type things where, like, if a car's sensors are disabled, it can get a signal and know to get off the side of the road, and they can just say, this is how the country does it, and then that's what happens. So there's some advantages to central control when it comes to that kind of thing. But in America, I don't know. Nobody's working on this problem. And for me, it seems like that's the biggest problem. If there's going to be widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles, you've got to figure out how to get them the hell off the road when there's trouble. And no one seems to care. And
that is a real problem because how do you even, like, you come up with a solution, whatever the solution is, and then what do? Get someone to just get a big hammer and just start smashing stuff on the car and see if it can keep, how much stuff do you have to break, or break the one thing that does the job, and then it can't do it, but it needs to do it.
Yeah, it has to know. I mean, there's so many things that could potentially go wrong. There's a lot of sensors, a lot of electronics, they're complicated. I mean, there's no way around that. There's a lot of things that can fail. Even if our reliability is really good, it doesn't matter. You get masses of these things out there. Some will fail. And right now, a human being, of course, could pass out, could have a heart attack or whatever at the wheel. We know that. That's a thing that can happen, and there is no good solution. They crash. It's not good. But it happens, we're building something that's supposed to be better than humans. We're trying to solve these problems. Doing something that's just as bad isn't worth the extra hardware that you're putting in. And I don't know. It feels like it's so frustrating because I just wrote up something about what the problem is with level 3. And I wrote up why I think it's a problem. And David is like, you got to talk to a real engineer. It can't be this vague. It can't be that they have no solutions. So I found an actual AV engineer, works for a major automaker, and he told me there aren't solutions. It is the level, the SAE level of level 3 is this vague. There aren't parameters in place. No, everybody is just guessing, was I think an actual quote of his. Why are we okay with that? For something this big, we shouldn't just be guessing. We should be coming up with standards and procedures first, and then design machines to fit them. I just feel like we're going about this in a crazy way.
Look, like, these are the stages. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know what it goes to. Is 4 the top. But 3, you're not actually allowed to use. 3 is like a testing level. It's got the systems, but we've always got a driver and whatever. And then you're like, when you get to the next level, but how?
It's even more confusing because the levels. Everybody assumes the levels are levels of capability, but they're not. It's not about what's more advanced. It's the levels just refer to the state of interaction between the machine and the person.
Oh, okay.
Which is what's confusing because they shouldn't have called them levels. Levels, everybody thinks level up. It's not that. And this causes a lot of people, like when the Tesla stands get angry at me, they talk about, well, you have to go through level 2 to get to level 3 or whatever when I complain about level 2.
Not if you don't complete it.
It doesn't matter because it's just, level 2 just means human is always ready to take over. Level 3 means human is sometimes ready to take over. Level 4 means human doesn't have to pay attention in a restricted area. Level 5 is car does everything.
Everywhere. Yeah.
So, but you could have a level 2 system that is incredibly advanced, but they've still designed it so you have to be ready to take over. So it's inherently confusing. Everything about the way we're deploying this, frankly, I think is ridiculous. It does not feel like it makes sense in any way. The tech is amazing. The tech is growing at incredible rates every year. It's getting better and better. But the way that's actually being implemented and the way they're thinking about how to deal with these on a bigger systems, human machine level feels like nobody's paying any attention to because it's not the sexy part. Nobody wants to work on the regulations,
I'm so wary of it. We've got in the UK, they announced last week before, that we're going to have some buses, some like coaches that are going to use a certain road network, and they're going to be level 3 autonomous or something. Or no, they said something like fully autonomous. You know, obviously the article is going to say
if
that.
it's like a limited area, that means level 4. It's like fully autonomous in a restricted area.
I think they use public roads, and they've said in the sort of the press release stuff that I could find that they're going to be whatever level 4, but they're going to have some sort of. They basically said like EV professional driver assist humans. So they're going to have drivers that are going to sit there and not touch it and sit there. But we know how much of a problem that is. Yeah. So until they get to the point when it's fine, but they're going to be on the road. And as a passenger, I do not want to get in that vehicle ever. I'd rather just get in one that's driven by a human. Because if you're going to have a human driving it but not driving it, they're not going to be paying attention as much as they could be.
No, of course they won't. That's the inherent problem. The driving and
if it's not a closed network, then how's it going to work? Like they're not on rails.
No, I mean they can map if it's a closed network area. They can map those out pretty well, and those will tend to be like right now we have like Waymo and a bunch of other companies, Argo, that are doing these tests in restricted cities of fully autonomous vehicles, and they've been doing this for quite a while. Yeah. Generally, they work okay because they've mapped those roads out really well, and they only go in certain areas, and they know what to expect, and they're being monitored remotely. But I don't know. It's still an issue. And it still comes back to like, I feel like simple things are getting ignored. Get them off the road if there's trouble. Like that, I can't stress enough. Like why isn't everybody just working on that?
And we do have, but we do have the situation now. And then this is where the switches, the responsibility side, I think is such a huge part of the whole thing. Because if I'm driving a car and the engine could blow up. So technically it could just come to a halt, or for some reason the brakes, which doesn't seem to happen, but let's just say for some reason your brakes all locked up, fried, and you just ground to a halt. It's your fault. You're stuck in the middle of a motorway here. Everyone's going 70 miles an hour, and you need to get out of the road. Right. Okay, shit situation. You may die, but it's sort of your responsibility, your fault, etc. to some level. As soon as you flip that the other way around, they might say, yes, computers will be better than humans, which statistically might be possible. Humans are pretty good at driving and blah, 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 blah.
Shockingly good at driving, actually,
Like really good at driving.
Yeah, it's weird.
On certain roads, etc., you'll get less of people distractedly on their phones driving into other cars because the car might slow down. But as soon as you switch that round to it's not your responsibility, the level of incidents that I think most people are willing to accept for me, it goes to naught. I am not comfortable driving along at 70 miles an hour in a car that could make a mistake. Right.
It's very different when you can, but there's a big conceptual difference between, it's like how some of the best drivers I know, racing drivers, hate being a passenger. Like I know really good drivers who just can't be a passenger because they're fundamentally not in control. That it's the same feeling you're going to get because you don't know. And also you generally know this sense, like if you wake up in the morning, you don't feel great, or you can tell when maybe you shouldn't be driving. You can pass software updates now, over the air updates to cars that are probably fine, but maybe not. Maybe there is a bug in there. Software is complicated. There was just a situation just like last week or the week before, Volvo sent an over-the-air update that completely bricked a whole bunch of cars. They put them into like the anti-theft mode, and people just went out in the morning and couldn't drive them.
Yeah.
This was not a voluntary update. It was just sent out as like a bug fix, and then people just parked, and then the next day, car doesn't work. Autonomous software is full of code and complicated code. So how do you know you put in over the air update for something might not be working, and then all of a sudden it doesn't show up until a particular set of circumstances appears in the road, and then without warning you're boned? I don't know. I mean, we trust computers for all kinds of things. Chances are it'll be okay.
It'll get there. I think it will get there, but when? 50 years maybe. I don't know. But it's interesting, but I agree that certain stuff seems to be rolled out. We're rolling stuff out ahead of maybe like definitely with, let's say, Teslas. Yeah, come at me, people, whatever. I do quite like Teslas, but some of the fully autonomous driving, whatever that you can buy with your Tesla, we know they even say it's not fully autonomous. They just say
except
it
the
is.
name. The name is
autopilot. But there's so many clips of like cars making mistakes and just like veering into a cyclist, that sort of thing. Like that's not okay.
No, and then it's incredibly impressive for what it is. It's incredibly impressive, but that doesn't mean it's finished. It doesn't mean it's good enough to drive on public roads. And it's okay if you, as the owner, have decided I want to be part of this beta test. Everybody else around you hasn't agreed to be part of the beta test. There's all kinds of problems, and it's
links quite nicely into the MOT problem.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Not everybody has agreed to be on the road with your piece of shit that might fall apart. Yeah. That's a very valid point. Absolutely. I guess unless you're in Michigan where everybody just assumes everybody's driving.
You just stay really far away from everyone.
Also, you can kind of see, like when you drive by one of those trucks and the frame is very clearly sagging in the middle, you just know.
But these are the sorts of things that you pick up as a human. Like these tiny, and especially if you pay a lot of attention to driving, and pay a lot of attention to humans, and that's, I think, is a more important part of the whole thing. You pick up stuff about a car and a driver and the way they're acting way better than a camera. I mean, cameras couldn't do it because
we rely on human culture is such a big part of driving. We don't even realize it. Like you've driven well, I guess London might be this way, but in New York, if you want to drive through an intersection, and there's people will just cross in front of your car. And the way you have to do it is you sort of drive like you're going to run into people, but you don't really mean it. And people will eventually give way. How do you program a computer to drive like you might hit somebody, but don't really mean it? Or gestures. We make gestures all the time. People, or you see someone in the corner has a little kid. You know, the little kid might do something crazy because they're a little kid. They might do shit. So you adjust accordingly. How do you program all these years of just human culture into a car to understand? You know, we can see someone looks a little crazy on the corner. Maybe they're in a car. Maybe they're driving weird. We go on alert.
Eye contact. How do you program that in? Because that's a huge part of driving. If you've made eye contact with someone, you know they've seen you. And
exactly.
They're not going to pull out, or they might pull out, and therefore you can continue. But
LA has an unwritten rule of that, like where if you're trying to get into a lane of traffic, if you make eye contact with a driver, the rule is they have to let you in. And I've been driving in LA where someone is just very much trying not to make eye contact. And then I've done it, and they'd be like, you won. Like how do you program that stuff? Like these weird unwritten societal cultural driving rules? They're huge.
Your lights are eyes, and then if a light sees the other lights.
Yeah, that's true. But then they just have to flash them the right way. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's all extremely fascinating. As you know, as troubling as these problems may be, they're all interesting problems.
It is interesting.
That's basically what this whole book is about.
Yeah. Cool. Right. Well, I normally wrap this up with 5 questions.
Okay.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of, let's see, which one would I pick? So I did the Baja 1000, desert race with a guy named Mark Stahl. And that was a fascinating bit of driving because you're in some very strange desert environments. And there's this weird, almost talcum powder like silt that we would get stuck in. And it just was full of strange things. Like in the middle of the desert at night, we had lost, like every light was on in the dash. We'd lost like power. Oh yeah, Class 11 Beetle. I love those. I got to drive one of those once. I loved it. so like everything was failing in a car, and we saw this church in the darkness as we went by in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And Mark remembered years ago, because he'd run this race before. He did it. He's like a 3-time Ironman winner, which means he did it alone, which is insane.
Okay.
And he remembered this church, and he remembered there's a guy who lived nearby who he called Guadalupe, which is a woman's name, but I don't really understand how it works. But we found the guy's house at like 2 a.m. and he woke him up, and we got like tools and lights, and he gave us some beer, and we like fixed the car, and then we kept going just because he remembered this guy from like 8 years ago, the last time he did that race, and just by chance he was still there. And then we also we got we got stuck so badly in the desert when it was like so late at night. I was trying to call the support team and the satellite phone. We were getting no signal. I actually had to send my wife a message on Facebook to see if she could get anyone to help us, but no one was there. And then we eventually found some locals, but the terrain was so uniform. He got lost trying to come back, but I could hear him. So I had to just have him yell with these guys, and I had to go find him and scrape arrows into the ground with my feet and then find him back. It was absolutely insane. I mean, that's a crazy driving experience. I've also driven like in India, which is bonkers in a completely different way.
Yes.
Across glaciers in Iceland. Like, they're all kinds of, this job affords amazing driving trips. So there's a lot to pick from, but
so do you get, what percentage of your time are you sort of out doing stuff versus at home doing stuff?
Pre-pandemic, it was a good amount of time. Pre-pandemic, it was probably like 25 to 30%, something like that. Now it's a lot less because trips have slowed down, but they're starting to pick back up again. So I don't know where it'll end up, but I bet it'll probably get up about probably about a 25%-ish.
Yeah.
Right now it's hard because of the site. I'm stuck down here a lot, just keeping it going. But we do have trips planned, and that's part of what makes this job amazing, is going places. Like I was on a mini trip going from Chile down to the tip of Tierra del Fuego down there, Ushuaia, in South America. And I knew in Chile was the only place in the world they made fiberglass minis. And the mini people didn't know about it, but I was walking around, because whenever I go on these trips, I try to just wander around the neighborhoods looking at interesting cars. And I saw one house that had a bunch of cars in the yard, and one of them was a mini. Everything was rusty, except the mini I saw was mossy. It wasn't rusty, which means it's probably not made of metal. And I was looking at it, and the person in the house saw me, and like I started talking to him, asking him, and it was one of these rare fiberglass minis. And then in the back, his dad was there and had a shop and used to work at the old mini factory and had one he was restoring. And cars are such a great conduit to meeting people and seeing things. I don't even remember what the hell the question was at this point. But anyway,
no, it sounds cool.
The travel is great, is what I'm saying. Yeah. You learn a lot.
Okay. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you're allowed like a $500 something on the side. So you get two cars technically, but one unlimited value, whatever, sports car or anything. And then one's like $500.
Like a shit box. And that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So my ultimate car, a Tatra T87. You know the Tatra T87?
No
Czech
idea.
car, rear engine, air cooled. I've always loved these things. There's not many of them. I've driven one once, and they're just astounding cars. They look like refugees from this future that we predicted in the 1930s that never really happened. Yeah, these things. I love these things. So this would be like, if I could only have one, I would have a Tatra T87. And then my little crap box would be, what would I get? Like maybe, I'd say $500. I don't think I could get I would do an old Beetle, but I don't think you can get an old Beetle anymore for that cheap. So
everything's got expensive.
Yeah, they're pretty expensive. Now I'd probably get like what would be like a little $500 beater I could get. My Yugo's pretty much like something a little better than my Yugo, maybe for that. Maybe a Metro, a Geo Metro, Geo Metro, and Tatra T87. That seems fair.
Sorted. Sweet.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What should be worth more?
Undervalued. Let me think. There's a lot of it. Let's see. So I feel like South America has all kinds of interesting cars that nobody really is aware of in America, like collectible wise. Because so Brazil, for example, had a weird closed economy for a long time. So they made cars that filled like every single niche. So Brazilian Volkswagens, I love. Like the SP2 is like a sports car. The VW SP2 is just a fantastic looking car. I don't think they're that well known in America, and they're so cool. They're underpowered, but it's easy enough to get more power out of them. I think maybe they go for more in America because they're so uncommon, but they're just not that known. And I just think I love the look of them. They're very cool. It's basically a VW Type 3 under there, but I think maybe some of those. Like I'd go through like and see what they have in like Brazil and Argentina.
Yeah.
Generally unknown outside of those areas, and they're all so cool.
Yeah. I love it when just searching on like Google for, let's say, a car like this, and then you come across, maybe it might be like a Speed Hunters article or various ones where someone's like taken one and pushed it like to the limit in terms of what you can do with how they look, and you're like, oh, they've taken something that looks a bit interesting, and made it like seriously cool.
They're the look of these things is fantastic, and they're rear engine, so that whole front is just a big shallow trunk. And the engine's under the floor in the back. Like they don't really look like what you'd think they were laid out. Like they're very much a sheep in wolf's clothing. Like they're fun.
That's cool. Right, most interesting car to you at the moment?
Most like modern or like just
any, like what are you Googling? What are you looking up?
Let's see, most interesting car. I've been fascinated by, God, this is a dipshit answer, but okay, I've been doing a lot of research. I have a plan this year. So, cars prior to 1886 are things I've been really interested in because Mercedes claims that they invented the automobile when they very much did not. And so I've been kind of on this mission where I want them to rescind that. I don't want them to keep saying it. So I've been doing a lot of research lately on cars from like the really early era. Like there was an era of steam vehicles in the UK in the 1830s, like steam buses. So there's a bunch of cars that were being built in that like 1830 to 1870 period. Leon Bollée made these French cars, and he serially produced one of them. Was it called like La Mansell? But it was a steam car, and they made like 75 of them. And the fact that you could buy a steam car way back in like in the 1870s just fascinates me. So lately I've been that's why I had this crazy book here, because I've just been going through these like early 1800s like crazy steam vehicles, and I feel like they don't get enough credit for how much they actually did for pioneering like automotive traffic. And there's, I don't know, some of them I'm trying to see like things that look like this, like real clunky ass things, but they're cars. There's no question they're cars. And so lately that's been kind of my obsession.
That's a good one. And final question, 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Okay, 5-car garage. Well, I'm gonna have my Tatra in there. My Tatra T87. I want a NSU Row 80. You know the Row 80?
No idea.
Beautiful car, rotary engine car. It was so ahead of its time. I really like those. I think I'd like a Row 80.
How do you spell that?
Just NSU RO 80.
Oh yeah,
yeah, they're cool. I'd also like a Toyota Sports 800. It's this little Toyota sports car. I love these. I love early Japanese cars. And it,
did this rev to like crazy amounts?
They're a little flat twin, but they just look like a blast. Like I love cars that you're technically going slow, but it feels like you're going fast. Like that thing, I think would be a lot of fun. So let's see. So I got those three. I want a good van. I want one of the Corvair vans, the Corvair like Greenbrier vans. Like I think they call them the Greenbrier. Yeah. You can do Corvair van. You'll see it.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, a good Corvair van, like a two-tone. Maybe I'll do a camper version of that because I think we'd have a lot of fun with that thing. Oh, and then you know what I want? I want an amphibious car. I want an amphicar. Because I think like amphibious cars, I've got a bunch of lakes here and I carry a canoe around on the roof of my POW. And every time I'm doing it, I think it's a pain in the ass to take the canoe off and do it. And I see people backing in boats. All of that sucks. And like, it doesn't have to be a good boat. I just want to dick around on a lake and I just want to drive in. And I've driven amphibious cars before. And that moment where you go from land into water is one of the best motoring experiences you can have. It's so good. So yeah, I want an amphicar. So yeah, that's a good. So Patrick T87, Row 80, Toyota Sports 800, Corvair van, Amphicar. That's a perfect garage right there. What more would you want?
That is sweet. That bit, that moment when you see someone backing a truck or whatever with a boat into the water, and half the car goes into the sea, for example.
It's never good.
Like, what are you doing? that is not what you do with a car. Like, salt water messes stuff up.
It's terrible. I've had a friend who lost a car in the water because he didn't set the brake right, and it just went in, and the tailgate was open, and it was under in minutes. It was just gone, and like it's such an ungainly. It's slippery. Like the whole process is unpleasant. I feel like there's a market for a good modern amphibious vehicle because it's just fun, and you're not doing anything like, especially on a lake. You don't need that good of a boat. It's just got to float, and you hang out on it, and you have fun for 2 hours, then you drive away.
Because that's always the trade-off, isn't it? Is it a boat that can go on land, or is it a land vehicle that can be a boat? Because which one's it going to excel at?
Technically, they're not going to be that great at either. I think you got to err on the side of car. Because I think for most people, you don't demand that much out of your boat, especially if you're just going on a lake. Like this would be like the ideal one. I think would compete with like those pontoon. It's basically just a patio that floats out there, and people go out there and drink beer, and have fun. That's all it's got to be. So it's just got to be decent enough to get you to and from work and get your groceries. But then you could just drive it right into the water and just putter around and enjoy yourself. That's what I want.
I saw one of these things the other day. It was like a. For the people that are listening, it's like a boat with wheels that sort of come down. I don't know what it's.
That's the other extreme.
Amphibious or something.
Look at that. Can you drive that on roads? That thing's hilarious. I
saw it. I was down on the sort of south coast of England, and someone came into a harbour in the thing. It just looks like a rib. And then I saw this wheel go down, and they just drove out onto the side. I think that's pretty much the extent of where you would drive it. So it's literally just, you can then just drive it out, and then it's
out of the water.
Out of the water, and that works quite well. And then you put it in, and the wheels sort of retract. But I thought that was pretty hilarious.
You know who should be building these is... So Volkswagen technically made the most amphibious vehicles of anybody during World War II. The Schwimmwagen was like a Beetle-based amphibious car. It's got a Beetle motor and drivetrain. It's like a little boat. It's spelled like SCHWIMMWAGEN, and they're great. Of course, the Nazis used them, so that part's a little dicey for marketing, but. Technically, VW has made more amphibious like passenger cars than anybody.
They look pretty
good. And these things actually work really well in the water. You could just belly flop them off a dock and just tool around in them. So if they came out with a modern civilian version, I think they would sell a lot of these. If you could buy a Golf that you could drive into a lake, I think they would sell a crap load of these things.
They would sell some. Definitely not. Definitely here, not that much.
Maybe not a crap load. I would be interested. It would be like the first new car I'd be thinking,
Yeah, truly different.
It'd be fun.
You'd get some looks driving that down the street. Right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking, so thanks very much. And everybody, please visit the Autopian, autopian.com, or I think we reserved autopian.com as well. So please, we got new stories going up every single day. And we'd love to have you there in the comments and chatting.
Sweet. Are you on Instagram, any of that stuff?
Yeah, Instagram. I think Jason Torch on Instagram, Jason Torchinsky on Twitter. You can buy Robot Take the Wheel at finer bookstores or Amazon everywhere. And
Cool. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.